the pace of growth of data is way more than what any technology can handle.
Why is it such a difficult task for people to make sense of the data?
The way I describe it is the six blind men and the elephant in the room problem. But the underlying technology is extraordinary. Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Because this is, I think, the first time in human history that we have been able to bring the data of the world together.
Where do I draw the line and make sure that my data is used in the right way, or I am part of a data ecosystem which is ethically being built? Hello and welcome to The Interface, the Hindus podcast to make sense of the accelerating pace of change underpinned by technology. I'm your host, John Xavier. In today's episode, we'll be covering a lot of ground around artificial intelligence's real source, data. Where did it all start? How things have changed with the big data revolution? And how has the influence of unstructured data played out in the field of artificial intelligence? These are some top questions, but apart from that, we will also be discussing areas around how data licensing works and what's been the impact on businesses around the use of artificial intelligence. Are people really interested in deploying these tools, or are they starting to rethink on how they deploy these language models? Joining me to discuss this range of topics around data is Nitin Seth, CEO of Incido and the author of Mastering the Data Paradox. Glad to have you on our show, Nitin.
John, so nice to be talking to you, and thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. Nitin, so we'll get the ball rolling. So as I made the entry into the intro part, could you give a sense of the whole data flow? I'd like to help me uh, set the stage where you, as a management consultant, were doing a track study, and what was your experience on piecing through the data back in, I think, the 90s, prior to the dot-com boom?
Yeah. Let's rewind the clock, and I feel very fortunate, John, that when I graduated from business school and joined McKinsey, I think I barely, I think at that point I had set up my email ID and I didn't even have a phone. When I joined McKinsey, for many months, we used to share one phone. Within our team, our engagement team. So that's where we started from. And then, over the last 25, 30 years of my career have kind of coincided with the growth of the digital and data and AI, these three forces which are really driving the world. So, but kind of just paint a little bit of a picture that when I started my career, as a junior associate in McKinsey, data was scarce. Okay, data was scarce. So, as a highly priced consultant, a lot of the job was, today, what you would do at the click of a button on Google, right? Let alone ChatGPT. That you were kind of, those were early years of the whole opening up of the Indian economy. A lot of our clients in India were doing strategy studies, growth studies. And any strategy, you need to first put like basic market data together, competition data together, and that data didn't really exist. You would literally go through some, we used to have a what we call R&I, research and information, that would have some books, and you would go and kind of from the books and journals, you will ferret out some data. And most of the time, you were doing primary research. So I still remember, this very exciting study, where we are doing like a international expansion, strategy for a tractor company, and a lot of my colleagues actually went to Brazil, for market sizing. I said, look, this is really cool, man. Like, this is amazing. So, and it was, to kind of do a bunch of interviews and then, piece, at least, and we used to call it triangulation. Okay, and triangulation was a fancy word to say, we are bringing different data elements together and forming a picture, but it really was that there was no data. There was very limited data. Yeah, and and most of that was using that very limited data and making some intelligent guesses. And you had very bright people, who could make those intelligent guesses. No, it had nothing to do with actual data. So that's the world we started from, and and yeah, but the next stage of my journey, so after 4 years, and this was the dot com boom, and I left McKinsey and I set up my own dot com venture, and that soon, from dot com boom it went to dot com bust. So that's a different story. And and then I, at that point, I chose to come back to McKinsey, and I kind of felt that okay, I was a good consultant, with all these triangulations, but was not a very good entrepreneur. So I felt I had to learn that. And McKinsey was setting up its Global Knowledge Center, MCKC. At that point, it was already set up. It was in its very, very early stage, some 30, 40 people. I joined that, as its leader. I felt it was a good opportunity to learn how to be an entrepreneur, but still in the familiar setting of McKinsey. And it was a shock to me, John. It was a shock to me because I had just been out of McKinsey for 2 years. Yeah, I came, and this was kind of like a adjunct to McKinsey. Yeah, it was a big struggle. Was it's really a part of McKinsey? It's McKinsey B or whatever, right? But even there, and the bright kids that we had, I was amazed. This tractor study in Brazil, you know, all this data was now available. And these were kids, from schools, very young kids, who were just, putting it on Excel, and, even in just a couple of years that I had been out of the firm, the data had gone from offline to online. The quantum of data had exploded by an order of magnitude, and it had become very easily accessible. Yeah, and therefore it was just a big shock to the traditional consulting model, because from very high priced consultants who were coming, all IIT, IIM, and blah blah blah, you had okay, people at a very different price point who could actually do it a lot more efficiently, and much faster, and which was amazing for me as a somebody who had grown up as a consultant, and of course that we grew that very significantly. So when I joined MCKC, it was 30, 40 people, and so I was so people told me, look, the maximum demand for something like this in McKinsey could be like 200 people. Yeah, and eventually we said, ended up setting up global knowledge center in multiple locations, Brussels, Waltham, in the US, Costa Rica, Wroclaw in Poland. India alone was more than 1,000, globally, many thousands. And that completely changed the McKinsey model. Now you progress a couple of years, and then I saw a different thing, that first was just this whole information piece, and then I just saw that data was exploding at even a way more pace. Okay, and just the nature of this was about getting information, right? The first part that I described. The second part was, okay, you have the information and you do some analysis on that. Yeah, and the basic tool for analysis in McKinsey was always Excel. We believed that Excel, you don't really need anything beyond that. And then I saw that hey, data was exploding. There was way more data. Yeah, not only was it easily available, it was, but the volume had just exploded. And suddenly you had tools like SPSS and SAS, which you needed to really work on it. And with that, there were completely different set of possibilities, and that's where really analytics came in. And look, in McKinsey, we were doing things like we had a risk practice, but we never did analytics. Yeah. And we said, no, this is low end. This is not what we do. We do like risk strategy and risk organization. But the reality was we did not have the capability of doing risk analytics. Yeah. But now that data exploded, and you could use very, very different type of tools, which go well beyond Excel. We could build analytics as a specialized capability. Firm, even a great firm like McKinsey never understood it. So it was a long battle and struggle for me to evangelize that. But look, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. I believe digital analytics, is now a very significant part of McKinsey. So look, we can keep going on with just the McKinsey story, but even in that short, what I'm describing to you, this was a great explosion I saw. Yeah, in many different ways, and this gave me the insight, and also of how the consulting business and a great firm like McKinsey could be reshaped with the explosion of data, and I had the opportunity of contributing to it, and that's in part the inspiration for my book, Mastering the Data Paradox, because it was, I saw very up close, the tremendous possibilities, which this explosion of data kind of presents itself.
Right. I mean, thanks for setting the stage through your time at McKinsey and how you kind of went through the whole process. And I know that you also detailed that in the book, how difficult it was to kind of push that whole idea into the firm, which had its own ideas around how to do strategy consulting and how do you want to bring in the whole knowledge piece in there. I think from there, what's also happening is around that time, roughly, if I should say uh, around the Great Recession time, is when the big data explosion also starts happening, and also that's the start of the time when social media is coming into play, and you are moving to Flipkart that time as their chief operating officer. And again, you point out in the book, how difficult it is. Like, there's so much of information, and then you find it so difficult to process that, right? So it's like a totally different paradigm when you are starting in the pre-dot-com boom, when there's dearth of data, and then here you're staring at mountains of data, but you're kind of baffled on what to do. Can you explain what kind of why do you think that's so baffling, or why is it such a difficult task for people to make sense of the data?
It's the You're so right, that from a data scarce world, we very quickly flip to not just a data abundant world, but where it just is too much. Okay, let me just put some things in perspective, John. That 90% of the data of the world has got created over the last 2 to 3 years. Okay, so 10,000 years of recorded human history or more. 90% of that data has got generated over the last 2 years. Most of that is unstructured data. Yeah. Or to see it another way, if you look at the last 25 years, which kind of coincides with my career, I kind of did the analysis that way. Data has exploded by 100 to 150,000 times. Yeah, human population has gone from 1 to 1.3x. The global GDP has gone probably 2.5, 3x. Um, Data has grown 100 to 150,000 times. So I don't, as a student of history, I don't know too many parallels, John, in the march of mankind. That something has exploded at that much, right? And that presents, it's a completely different paradigm. It just presents many different challenges. It's of course, there are challenges around technology, that how do you get it together. But the but that also is the issue, John, because the way what's been happening is that the conventional wisdom is that, okay, there is so much data, let's first get it together, physically in one place. You talked about data lake and some of these terms, right? That you have an infrastructure, there is some kind of a cloud based infrastructure, where you bring it together. It could be more structured like data warehouse, unstructured like data lakes, or some combination of that. And from there, then you start to form a logical view, like a customer 360, and then you get some insights from it. Yeah. And this kind of bottom up and sequential view just doesn't work, John, because what's happening is that the pace of growth of data is way more than what any technology can handle. Yeah. So it's like the famous Malthusian equation, where the he says that the means of production grow in arithmetic progression and population grows in geometric progression. So there is always a gap. It's a lot more of a stark gap here. Yeah. So it's that these technology led data initiatives never complete. They take years and years, and what happens is that in that time, that what the problem you were looking to solve changes. Yeah. Because one of the reasons that moved me away from strategy to kind of more execution and doing things was that somewhere I kind of read and then I researched that the half life for any strategy now is 6 months. That your core assumptions change in 6 months. And when you're trying to kind of drive this big technology initiative, it's a lot more than that. Yeah. So you're always chasing. Yeah. You're all, you never complete it. You never complete it. Even if you complete it, there is the connection between the problem and the data is very tenuous. Now, the way I describe it is the six blind men and the elephant in the room problem. Yeah, I'm sure you have read it somewhere in kindergarten or primary school, that you have these six blind men with the elephant, and each one of them is seeing a different thing and say, feel this is the reality. Somebody has a tail and say, oh, it's a snake. Somebody has the trunk and say, oh, this is a tree. And that's what happens with data. Yeah, that it's across different levels. There is a technology layer, there is the data itself, there is a logic layer, which is where analytics and now AI happens. On top of that, there is a business user or the customer who has a problem or some KPIs. There are, at least at the simplest level, four layers. Yeah. And with at the best of times, a connection between those layers is very tough. Yeah. And now, especially with the explosion of data, that integration has become very, very, very tough, almost impossible to drive. And that is leading to the paradox, right? That's where the notion of the paradox comes in. You framed it as a blessing and a curse, right? I don't exactly put it as a curse, right? Maybe it is. That the way I like to describe it is as water, water everywhere, yet not a drop to drink. Yeah. That you have a data deluge at one end, and you have a drought, an inside drought at another end. And you use the word ocean somewhere. It is like that you're in the middle of the ocean, you have water all around, but salty water, and you're parched, you're very thirsty, but you can't drink that. That's the situation. So I think those two visuals, right? The water, water everywhere, yet not a drop to drink. That's the outcome of what we are seeing. And
Right.
the input of that is the six blind men with the elephant situation. That the data has exploded. It's very difficult to bring it, kind of front to back together. You know, you're seeing very different people are seeing different views, and the problem and the data and the technology just doesn't connect.
Right. Yeah. That's a very interesting one. I think, yeah, water everywhere, not a drop to drink is the more ideal area. But if you want to dive deep into the whole data part itself, now we are looking at we used to look at symbol, I would say, a microservice based data, like some kind of a batch system processing, and then we moved into real time. Now a lot of things seems to be happening on real time basis, and we are also coming into a new paradigm where data is also being created by artificial intelligence agents. So we are beyond the exponential. I don't know if there's a scale for beyond exponential, but the whole I mean the data that we are creating right now with humans plus AI and all of the systems put together, this is going to be huge and a lot. Is there a way to kind of say that we don't want this kind of information. How do you say that this is the kind of information that I want for my company or for me as an individual? Where do I draw the line and make sure that my data is used in the right way, or I am part of a data ecosystem which is ethically being built?
Number of number of threads in that, John. So first, let's get to this point of what data do I need, and then we'll get to the ethics of it. So uh, see, the way to make sense of this big data is actually to narrow it. Yeah. So 95% of um, see, actually, some of the approaches we had in the data scarce world that we started a conversation with, we need to bring them back. Okay, and we lost them in the data abundance world. Yeah. So now, as an ex consultant yourself, you would know that in that data scarce world, we would start by saying, here is the problem statement. Okay, I want to, let's again, I want to assess the market size, and the market size, I want to assess it today, I want to project it 5 years into the future, and for that, let me establish the segments for, what is the size of these segments, and you know I maybe need to, there is some data that may be there, but I may need to, these are set of factors that may drive growth in the future. Let me understand the factors and build a growth model. Some things like that, isn't it? So because the data was so scarce, you had to be pretty sharp about the problem solving around it, isn't it? On what is needed. Now you kind of switch to a data abundance world. Yeah. And you are just trying to just get all data that, oh, let me, so again, let me take another example, which is understanding your customer, and which kind of leads to this thing called customer 360. You are a bank. Yeah. Now that customer 360 can happen at so many different levels, John. Yeah. And finally, what you're interested in is that, what is growth. Yeah, what do I sell more to the customer? Or it is risk management, that is the customer likely to default, or what are other risks around the customer, right? But you're trying to just you have so much data, and I can collect it and I can bring it together, so you end up doing it. Yeah, and that's where you get lost. There is lot to my submission, my experience, even with the, not just with Flipkart, and I'll get back to Flipkart because also a very interesting story, but serving the largest companies in the world, the large telcos, the large banks, the large pharma companies, which are the biggest producers of data in the world, is that the connection between their business objectives and the data is so poor, it is mind boggling. It is mind boggling. Yeah. And that is what has to be reinforced, John. And that's why I've written this entire book. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
today
I think coming back to your that sorry to cut you there. I think your framework basically builds on the trees part on how the business value proposition is the most important thing under which everything else flows.
absolutely, because that, John, is the way of narrowing the problem. Okay, because to make sense of big data, you have to narrow it, and the only way of narrowing it is really to say, okay, what are the set of problems that I'm looking to solve? How do I break down those problems? How do I get to what, therefore, what data I need? Yeah. And let me at least first go and do that. Yeah. So it's kind of a philosophy which is less is more. Yeah. And from an execution perspective, I use this frame of two-speed execution. Yeah. Speed one being a very narrow and well-defined use case. And speed two is, okay, how do we bring those together to build a big picture? Yeah. So again, going to the customer 360 example, that, in my experience for the last 20 years, I was building customer 360s with McKinsey. I was doing that at Fidelity, the biggest active asset manager in the world. I was doing that at Flipkart, and I'm doing that for my clients here in Encido. It doesn't work. Okay, doesn't work, because he just keeps on expanding, expanding, expanding. The more it expands, getting something out of that becomes so difficult. Now, a customer 360 you may be doing for multiple reasons. Reason number one is cross sell. Yeah, that you want to cross sell your products. Even those are some defined set of things that I want to cross sell mortgage, to a credit card holder or something. No, these are defined set of things. Or it may be to prevent churn, that I fear that some customers may leave me, and what do I do to prevent that? These are some defined things, right? So a speed one would be, you pick up one of these objectives, let's say cross sell, and then kind of go down to say, okay, what data I need, and where does the data reside within my company, and that will be different systems or outside the company. How do I bring it together and do it? Yeah, and then you do cross sell across more products, right? So you keep on adding it up. You want to do churn. You want to do lead generation. So and you add it up. Yeah, and you start to get your full customer 360, your full platform. Yeah, so that's kind of that's what I'm really recommending, that you need to put the business problem first. Otherwise, data will really drown you.
Right. I think that's a very important point when it comes to businesses approaching the whole world of AI, not just for the sake of applying some data principles or AI and bringing them into their business, but understanding what their core value proposition is. I mean, around that, I mean, I'd like to touch upon the AI hype or not cycle, which is a kind of a common running theme right now. Given that something has played out for a long period of time since 2022, ChatGPT landed on the scene. How do you see the overall AI ecosystem that has developed since 2022? Because it's clear that most of us who've been tracking AI for over a decade, things have been running on AI. But the whole thing changed with the transformer model, and then ChatGPT had actually brought generative AI, which kind of some people call it like a longer autocorrect or autocomplete system. Others call it a very intelligent system. What, in your view, is this generative AI doing to businesses and to people?
Yeah, I'm very clear. I think AI is not a hype. AI, mankind has probably gone through 200 kind of general innovations, including fire and wheel. AI is probably the 200 and the most significant, substantial one. And I think it kind of poses challenges to us as a human civilization to an extent, which I think very, we don't fully comprehend. Okay, so this is why is this so significant? Because again, the whole concept of AI, that this is able to simulate a lot of innate human capabilities. Yeah. So AI started, you said that you've been tracking for 10 years, and it's been happening for 30, 40 years, in a sense that it started with the self-learning aspect. Yeah, that traditionally systems were static. That you had you built an algorithm or a logic. You had an input, which was data, and you had an output. Right. Now with AI, what happened was that became, but that's not life, right? Life is very dynamic, and with AI, we began to simulate that dynamic thing, and that algorithm or the logic, became self-learning and adaptive. Yeah, so that was a big thing. But the limitation with AI was that it was dependent on data, and the data was and high quality and deep data. And that, while the big data was exploding, but it wasn't necessarily high quality and deep. Okay, it was a lot of unstructured data. So it was a lot of, again, goes back to your point about, how do you sift through data and what is important. It was a lot of garbage. Yeah. So it was clogging up server capacity and putting a lot of cost, but there was not much of value in that, right? Now, and that's why AI was really limited. It was not being driven by where it made sense, but where data was there. And then came the explosion of generative AI. with chat gpt. And what chat gpt just did was that really made it, deep kind of set of technology progress that was happening. They really made it B2C. They put a great interface on that so it can be accessible to many. But the underlying technology is extraordinary. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. Because this is, I think, the first time in human history that we have been able to bring the data of the world together. Yeah. And when you bring the data of the world together and we have built these very sophisticated neural network models on top of that, it is enabling us to do two things which are again innately human. The first is the ability to generate. Yeah. So it is not just a pure input, output, and logic thing, which has been the basic fundamental of all technology, all systems so far. It is able to generate. It may be wrong, it may have a bias, like a human being. Yeah, but it is able to generate. Now, even more fun. No, that's an aspect which people understand, right? That's where it's generative AI. Yeah, but there is another aspect, John, which to me is the most fundamental, which is that LLMs and generative AI are a breakthrough in terms of problem identification. Yeah, because again, as an ex-consultant, you know this very well, that in a problem-solving process, the most difficult thing is problem identification, and that's the human capability. Yeah, because the problems are messy, they are complex, and just framing them, narrowing them down is a very difficult process. And that process also takes, you need data, and that's where what data you need, and so on and so forth. These are very tricky things. Now, with generative AI, you're able to get a great first cut answer on almost any problem out there. Yeah, that you're able to get a 40 to 60% answer. Yeah, now that's not the perfect answer, but that's a great starting point. Yeah. So I'll give you an example that so we do a lot of work with telcos, telecom companies. For a telco, especially if you're in North America, the biggest issue is churn. There is no growth, there is no real organic growth. So you have 1-2% organic growth. So the way you really manage your revenue top line is by preventing churn. Now churn is extremely complicated, right? There are pricing, marketing set of actions, but there is also driven a lot by your network performance. And it's not easy to kind of break it down. And oftentimes the teams involved are also very defensive. No, they don't want to say, oh, our performance is bad. That's why we are having churn. No, oh, it's all marketing problem. Yeah, that kind of thing happens. And we have been working on that, and and building like we are building like a KPI tree. Building a root cause, and to build a KPI tree, you first kind of build a proper root cause tree. Very complicated, very tough. Yeah. And then I told the team, okay, give this problem to, you know, ChatGPT. And look, not the perfect answer, but an amazing answer. An amazing answer. Okay. And we have started to do that very consciously across all, at least most problems we deal with our clients. That you start by disaggregating the problem. It's not easy because the clients don't often think that way. Yeah. And as a consultant, you don't always have that expertise. Yeah. And so I've just been amazed. And but it's not just a point in that context, John. It's a much bigger point, that generative AI is unbelievable in terms of the initial problem discovery and identification, and that's where I think it is so foundational. So you kind of bring in the self-learning aspect that we're already getting with AI. You add in the generative aspect. You add in the problem identification. Yeah. You bring these things. Now, these things haven't necessarily come together, John. Yeah. So, the way I see things evolving is that it's a kind of three layers. You have a macro, enterprise, and individual. And in a macro layer, you have macro data. Yeah. And then, you have generative AI. And, and that really helps drive problem identification in the generative aspect. On top of that, you have the enterprise data. and that's kind of more deep and domain specific data sets, and that can help drive the contextualization. Yeah, because 40 to 60% is very interesting and super helpful, but not actionable. Not actionable. For something to be actionable, you have to take it beyond 80%, 80, 90%. No? And to do that, you have to bring the LLM and the enterprise data together. Yeah. And then on top of that, you have the individual, right? And which where you then drive hyper personalization, which is a big topic, and we should talk about that maybe at some point. So, but look, what's amazing is that there's a lot of progress happening in all of those three layers, John, but they haven't connected yet necessarily. But over the next, and that's where maybe there is this thing where, oh, is it hype? Because you have, like, some of my clients say, oh, we have an epidemic of POCs. In the large banks and telcos in the world, you have like hundreds, thousands of these POCs happening. But what the boards are expecting from them, yeah, that, array, you're supposed to drive, like, 20-30% productivity improvement. Where is that? That's what the boards are saying, because boards are very aware of all this, right? So they're not delivering that job yet. Okay. But make no
So
mistake,
the orchestration part has to come into play. Uh,
the connection between different layers, and the orchestration and the contextualization, and then the deployment in enterprise setting. I think that is what, there's a lot of work happening.
Right.
And my sense is maybe 12 to 24 months in which I think we will begin to see really significant impact.
That's interesting. I also want to touch upon these licensing deals. If you would have seen the whole Google Reddit deal, and also other companies trying to see how best they could capitalize on social media feeds. How does this kind of information play a role? Largely, it's going to be unstructured data. It's going to be a real tough job to kind of use it or process it in real time. But how do these deals play out in reality in the world where?
See, it's I think this is in a flux. There's a lot, flux right
Yeah,
now, John, in my mind. So I see with my clients that they're becoming extremely conscious about the cost of data and AI. Yeah. So I think for the last couple of years, it was a lot about, oh wow, this is amazing. I don't want to be left behind, and do have the right set of platforms. Okay, I make the choices in terms of my cloud platform, a data platform, whether it's Databricks and Snowflake. On top of that, I need to have orchestration platforms, whether it's Pega or Salesforce and blah blah blah. They were making these choices. They were kind of then also linking up. They were also recognizing that a lot of the data they need is now not within the organization but outside the organization, right? That's where you talked about some of the social media kind of enterprise kind of
mm,
feeds. And there was, of course, compute, and that's where Nvidia comes in. So I think last couple of years has been a lot about bringing the stack together. Yeah. Now I think with number of my clients, the conversation is really about, wow, this is very expensive, and this is way more expensive than what we had thought. And at this point, the cost of building AI and even the use cases at a reasonable level is way more than the benefit they're getting. Okay.
that's interesting. Could you give a little more? Can you describe that? What exactly is the issue?
So let's say one major theme, with generative AI for organizations is to increase productivity. Yeah.
Right.
So now, of course, there are many things which are more customer facing, but at this point, the more tangible benefit that is seen is around, let's say, your SDLC, your software development lifecycle, right? That how do you optimize that significantly, right from code design, code review to kind of quality assurance, right? Customer service. How do there is a potential of increasing productivity there by an order of magnitude. Mid office, back office processes, where you are handling a lot of documents, right? And historically, NLP has not made a lot of progress. So this was still a lot of manual work, but with generative AI, that changes dramatically. Yeah, so there is a possibility of changing that dramatically. Just yesterday, we were discussing legal process outsourcing. A client is looking at that, and we were talking to our general counsel about it, and and we were seeing that, hey, what are you going to really offshore? A lot of this should probably go right with now the kind of automation which is possible. So there's a lot happening around productivity, John. Okay. Now, today, for most of the situations, yeah, the the ROI is, or the payback period is quite high, yeah,
Mm.
because the cost of doing this is high, yeah, because you just look at the cost of your GPU cost, your cost of compute, your cost of cloud storage. Forget the consultant cost and so on. That's a small part, yeah. The infrastructure and the platform, the licensing fee, those fees, yeah, which may be pay variable and so on, but they really really can grow very very significantly, yeah. And therefore the cost of doing any pilot, is very high, very very high. I don't know of a single client, yeah, who is not feeling that pinch. Anybody who has made significant progress in their AI and therefore their data journey, because AI can't happen without data. And so, you as well call it, you concatenate that data and AI journey. Anybody who has made significant progress, I don't know if anybody who's not crying about costs, right? So I think that's a very big debate, right? So I think uh, there is a lot that's happening around usage. What do I really use? And therefore, I think a lot of the concepts we are talking about in mastering the data paradox, I think, become very relevant. That from taking a little bit of this brute force approach of saying I'll bring all this data together because it seems like a logical and good thing to do, yeah, and then I'll figure out how do I use it, because the more data I have, I'll get better insights. I think organizations are also realizing that there is a very heavy cost of doing that. There's a very heavy
Right.
cost doing that. And I think this notion of narrowing, which I'm coming at it more from, hey, you just can't deal with it. You need to narrow it to make sense. Organizations are coming to a similar point, but perhaps driven more by cost, and a need to better segment what their needs are, and therefore what data we need, what do we really, a lot of the data is real time, as you said. So
Right.
how much we store, how much do we store, at what level? Because even if you bring everything together, everything doesn't need to get go. You talked about oil, like it is like a refinery process. There is a data ingestion, you bring data together, there's a data processing, you get it to a data platform where it is then really, you build models on that, and you have insights, right? Each stage is kind of different, right? You don't need to take everything through all stages. So there is, I think your point about contractual arrangements, licensing fees, I look, I think there's a lot of scrutiny on that, and I think over the next 12-24 months, right now the kind of monopoly Nvidia has, or the kind of run AWS and Azure and GCP have had, I think organizations will begin to look at that very very closely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think also with the crowd strike and so many other things happening, a lot of these cloud-based activity was also something that people will start looking into. Nitin, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fantastic conversation. As you said, the whole idea on hyper personalization is a separate story altogether, which at some point we can come back to it. But it's been a pleasure connecting with you. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on data, AI, and all that's happening in this space. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, John. Thanks for the conversation, and I really enjoyed the chat. And look, this is a very big topic, so perhaps this is first of many conversations to have.
Lovely. Thank you. Thanks for tuning into the interface today. I hope you enjoyed the program. For more such episodes, do follow us on all major podcast platforms and on YouTube. Thank you.